Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well, and I hope that there is joy in your day. I'm recording this the evening of Mother's Day, so I want to shout out to all the great moms out there, and I hope you're having an excellent day. Jam-packed, a lot of stuff this weekend, a lot of different stuff this weekend. I will say though, I had alluded to last week about this very busy week that I had. Not only was it a busy day at the office, but I did tech at the People's Improv Theater for three really big showcases that were going on, and kind of like very intense, like several hours of rehearsal and then doing the showcases the same day, which is exciting, thrilling, and exciting for me to kind of just go up there, get it in, get it figured out, and then do it for an audience. So I felt really good about how those showcases went, as well as my tech for those. So I felt pretty good about that. And then coming into this weekend, I went to my first concert of the summer season. My favorite thing about concerts in New York City is the venue Pier 17, which is located down in the South Street Seaport area. And the first show I went to this on Friday, I saw Frank Turner and the Interrupters co-headline. Folks may remember Frank Turner has been on this podcast, and I'd never seen the Interrupters live before, and the other openers were Bedouin Soundclash and Chuck Reagan, of which I am huge fans of now. It was really just truly amazing night. Great weather, amazing vibes, and the Circle Pit, the Frank Turner Circle Pit is the most polite, friendly circle pit I have been in. I was just singing till my heart out, and my soul was warmed by the fact that I saw tons of little kids there with their parents who are just absolutely having the best time rocking out to the Interrupters. So ska will never die, and I feel like the future generations are going to be well suited. Saturday, I rode my bicycle to the Queens Night Market for the first evening of the season for me and my wife. Queens Night Market's out near Flushing. It's this huge open air food market, and it is one of my favorite summertime activities. You can get food from all over the world at this night market, and I feel pretty good of the fact that not only did I bike there and back, but I biked a total of 40 miles this week as well, as I'm trying to just increase my overall level of not athleticism is not the right word, but I'm just trying to be a little bit more active than I had been. So that was great. And today, after spending some time with my wife and mother-in-law at a tipsy painting class, I finally saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which, no spoilers, I'll just say I loved it, and it made me feel, and I thought it was great. So if you're into it, or even if you're not into superhero movies, I feel like people are saying this is the best Marvel movie in a while, and I'd have to agree. And on top of all that, I have a killer episode of this podcast to share with you. My guest on the show today is Becca Burg. Becca is an improviser and mainstay at the People's Improv Theater here in New York City. We met when she was the director for a recent iteration of Backdoor Barbecue at the Pit, and I knew she did improv. I knew she worked at the Pit, but we didn't really know too much about each other outside of that. So this was really one of those like get to know you kind of conversations that I have sometimes on this podcast, and this kind of stuff, like this sort of like deeper meaning, like kind of almost like prime, like there's we were really tapping into a vein of what I think it is to be a performer, in some of our kind of conversations about improv and sketch and solo shows. So there's a lot of really excellent comedy talk on this episode for everybody here, and I love the hell out of this conversation. I look forward to reliving it with you folks now. So if you enjoyed this, I have a lot of other episodes with comedians, a lot of funny people, a lot of funny and insightful people, because I feel that they often go hand in hand, that I think have enriched my life. I feel like I've grown out of these conversations I've had on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys. And if you want to listen to more of this, you can go to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everything related to me and what I do. And let's get into it and talk to Becca Burg. Yeah, because we met, I think that the first time we ever met was the rehearsal where I had to fill in for Mike, who had COVID at the time. So I was kind of like in the scenes, even though I'm usually not in the scenes. I usually don't even see the sketches until the first day of tech, and we're running cues. So that was kind of fun to get to play a little bit, especially with that particular show, because there was
oh my gosh, it was
such
so
wild
much fun. And for me too, to have you a part of the process was so normal for me because I hadn't worked with those guys before in that capacity. And so you being there and kind of plugging right in made sense with you, especially teching and seeing kind of the molding of a show kind of get pieced together. And so I was like, yeah, of course he's going to be there. Of course, if Mike can't be here, he's like, you're the perfect person for, all set of eyes and ears. And during your reads, I just was like, you could easily just have someone else tech and plug right into the show. You were killing it. You were killing it.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you were just cutting loose and just leaning into the play of it all. And especially at a rehearsal so early on in that process like that's exactly what you want. And you went there, and I loved every ounce of it.
Oh, yeah, because it was such a blast, because I haven't done, outside of doing tech, like that's probably the most sketch I do is the stuff I do at the pit, and with Backdoor for the longest I've been. I don't know if this will sound odd to you, but like I started at the pit, like I'd been very familiar with the pit from like open mics and stand up and stuff, but like I started doing tech as like, oh man, at a time where I really needed a side hustle.
Sure.
So I really got into that world, and just kind of like finding the creative elements of doing the tech work, not just being someone who goes up there and just hits the cues on the right lines, but like I often will interject like, well, you should really have this song as the exit out of this sketch. Or what was also fun, Mike and I recently, we were doing we were guests on a sketch podcast called Table Read that'll be coming out soon, and we were like working on jokes for the next news segment, and I got a couple jokes into news.
Oh, no way.
So I was pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is that going to be for the next show, or was that the one with Sarah Nowak?
That was the one we just did with Sarah.
Okay.
The joke about the woman in Spain coming out of a cave after 500 days. I came up with the line, and then when she saw the headlines, she decided to go right back in.
Yes, that's so perfect. That's great. That's a good one.
Absolutely. So had you done a lot of directing before you directed this Backdoor Barbecue show? Because I sort of know you as like this kind of like integral part of the pit community, but this is like the first time we're getting really to sit down, have like a long conversation. So there's a lot I don't know yet, but I'm gonna figure it all out.
Okay, cool. I love this process of the, we've had conversations and they've been in different contexts, but as I was walking here too, I was like, I don't know much of that other side. Like now, clearly I know you travel a lot as well.
Yes.
Given everything and just your eclectic taste. Like I'm piecing this together here too, which I love. I love that. And so for me, I had directing experience, but more so for theater.
Okay.
So like one act plays and full length plays are more so where I was kind of comfortable doing.
Okay.
So that was my first sketch show to direct,
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah, the approach is very different. And I really enjoyed the process, but it is very different from something where uh, uh, 30 minutes, whether it's like a one act or just, 2 hours of the slice of life. This is a
Right.
lot of different little slices of life that are put together that then create that larger story that we were doing, all of
Mm-hmm.
those through lines with the shopping mall and how these sketches, interweave together. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's an interesting creative pursuit as far as that goes, because you do get to tell a story in a different way than you
Mm-hmm.
would with just kind of one mono scene, if you will.
Sure. Well, because I imagine like when you're directing theater and like one acts, like sure you're looking for specific moments, but you're not necessarily like driving towards like jokes or
Right.
where's the funny. Like you're trying to build like the emotions of a scene. Because I did so many kind of like super serious one acts in high school and
Mm-hmm.
college, like really kind of stuff like when you're first getting into doing some kind of artistic thing and you're like excited to kind of tackle big issues.
Right. Yes.
If you know what I mean, like you're dealing with like super serious heavy topics and you're just up there with like bleeding the art onto the stage,
Yeah.
which compared to, and even compared to like how when I work like in stand up, the process of a sketch rehearsal and like the building of a sketch show, I imagine that for you, is there like a focus in finding like, I imagine you're finding moments also, but you're also trying to find like the funniest moment.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. Hmm. Yeah, I would say it starts macro, and kind of
Uh-huh.
what is this general fingerprint that we're trying to put on this thing.
Right.
And then when it comes down to each sketch, just making sure that those arcs are hit. Um, and I do love to zone in on I like breaking one sketch down into different beats and then finding those beats within that beat
Uh-huh.
is kind of how I like to narrow in on that. Because sometimes within that process, you're going to find other things that weren't blaringly funny, or that this was the thing that was going to take the cake for this sketch, but it naturally sort of, unfolded into that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and so then, yeah, once I think that thing is found within that beat, and then how can we maneuver to really punch this up, and do it in a way too where bringing in that like theater background, doing it in a grounded way where I think that it makes it just hit that much harder, because yeah, if you just fully commit, there's
Yeah.
nothing that you can do wrong then from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is just the key, is to be able to access that, and then the beat will find itself.
Yeah, that's something I heard a lot when I was going to college for theater, is about making just whatever choice you're going to
Mm-hmm.
make, just go for it. You can't really like half-ass it. If you're going to go big, then just go big, or if you're going to pull it back, then just really you got to like really lean into it, cuz
Yeah.
otherwise it doesn't feel right. And I remember like having to like get over that kind of like embarrassment of like really putting myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um and but once I started doing that, or it just, and this is also coming with age for me as well, I just give a lot less fucks now. And
Yes.
it's so freeing.
Mm-hmm.
um but and then I've
Mm.
also heard like the common like audition uh advice I've heard is like, just make a
Right.
strong choice. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that is it. Make that strong choice, fully commit to it, and even if you think it's dying halfway through, then whatever way that is in that process of fully committing, you can't do wrong when you fully commit, and that's what I do love so much about live performance.
Yeah.
Live performance above all, especially for this aspect, is that I once you fully commit, you are in that flow state. And once you're in that
Uh-huh.
flow state, for me, that is meditation. And it's easier for me to access in a live performance some sort of meditative state than actually trying to, with my ADHD brain, sit down and do these guided breaths, you know. But yeah, I think once you're in that flow state, that all of that embarrassing and all of these, you know, thoughts that float around us constantly are constantly buzzing at us, the self-awareness of it all, of like, what the fuck am I actually doing right now? You know, this is comedy. Why am I getting so wound up and stressed about this? And, you know, I want it to hit so hard, and it's just letting that all melt aside and fully committing. And I think that is your like easiest access into that kind of flow state.
Yeah, you're hitting on something really magical here that I'm really tapping into, like,
Oh, cool.
like, because I feel like, especially like in modern society, like I obviously a million people have thoughts about like the state of the internet, social media, etc. But how many moments in your life in 2023 do you have circumstances or situations where you literally just have to focus on a handful of things or one specific thing?
Right.
There's so few times. Like, sure, you could take like an unplugged kind of retreat, but live performance kind of demands your full attention. You can't really fuck around with a lot else, especially when you're like really putting yourself out there in any sort of like performance situation.
Right.
100%. I also think I've gotten really into biking
lately,
which you saw in my living room, and that's another immediate thing. When you're biking, you got to focus on the bike, otherwise the bus hits you.
Yes, especially out here. Oh my god.
Yeah. And then I feel like similarly when it comes to doing live shows, because you've got to be there in, I imagine for sketch and improv, you've got to be there for your crew as well. And for stand up, I've got to be there like for myself, because I don't want to risk like just really bombing and like in a way that I can't respect the attempt, like Evel Knievel. Like I could still crash into the gorge, but like it would look cool. You know, but but talking about that flow state, like I would love to, I'm sure you've had those nights where like every single thing just hits amazingly and you just feel like you're hitting like a big hill on a roller coaster, and you're just like, woo, you're just kind of floating and you're just kind of sailing through, and it's just like there's just it's just such a rush.
It is a rush. It is. It's so magical. It's magical. And it's special, and I feel like it's actually something we don't talk about that often, oddly enough. And I feel
agree.
like that is what I find the biggest benefit to all of this, because I think when you're also in that flow state, I don't know about you, but I learned so much more about myself as well. Because like you said, that we have so many distractions elsewhere. Like truly, what else can you do that really has to narrow your focus down into just things that, like you said, just a handful of things, even if not just one. And yeah, this flow state absolutely is this kind of sacred space that is I am constantly learning from it. So this past weekend, I just had done a performance art sort of thing at a music festival. So it was at an art installation.
Right. Yeah, you were telling me about that.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and I tapped into exactly kind of what we're talking about right now. Is the second day I played this character called Frank, and I had this like handlebar mustache I got from Etsy, and I had my like, it's my guy wig, but also like unisex wig, and I had like this visor on, and I was like, oh, let me add some sort of stubble. So I took my like eyeshadow, and then I kind of was just building it. I didn't really have anything set in mind, but slowly it started to kind of piece itself together. And Frank was born. So that's his name, Frank Beef. And, you know, he's a New York guy, and he doesn't give a fuck, you know, why are you coming into the bodega? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even want to hear any of his shit right now, you know? Like, I started to like be able to seep into this like no boundaries, but also no boundaries within myself, but
Uh-huh.
because Frank himself sees boundaries so clear cut, like
Right.
this is something you can do, this is something you can't do. This
Yeah.
is and no, like, no people pleasing. He's not a friendly guy. He's really agitated all the time. He's always at a 10 because he feels everything fully and he's about to
Yeah.
pop constantly. But uh I learned a lot about myself within playing him and kind of tapping into that flow state for the entire time that we were kind of running it, which was like 6-8 hours a day.
Right.
And yeah, and you learn so much when you get to access that.
Yeah, when you're playing this very like kind of specific character with the specific reactions, like you learn just where of that is in you so that you can communicate that. Were you wearing these aviators too, by the way? Because when you started doing that voice, I just had a lot of like 70s dad energy is
Ah,
kind of what I started
uh-huh.
thinking of. Like I just I imagine Frank is, if Frank's in New York, he probably doesn't have a ton of opinions about trucks, but that's probably more of me bringing my dad into
Okay.
into this idea. But I imagine that this person probably very definite opinions on the Knicks or
Mm-hmm.
the Mets.
Uh-huh.
Very kind of opinionated on restaurants,
Yes, yes.
like just basically like very principled in whatever that principle he decides
That's
is.
no, that's yes, that's exactly what it is that yeah, he's
Right.
very principled in whatever that is. Yeah, that's really summing it up. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, you tap that exactly.
Amazing. So let me ask you this: is there kind of like a patient zero moment for you in
Mm.
terms of when your brain switched and you recognized that the stage was it for you, or the arts
Oh,
was it for you?
interesting. Interesting. I also like to hear what everyone's response is to this question too.
Uh-huh.
So I definitely want to hear
Oh, this can
yours
be a
as well.
two-way street.
Yeah.
I love talking about myself on my show.
Oh, good. This is perfect. I when I loved the state, for some reason I was young and I knew I loved the theater. And I don't even think I knew exactly what that meant, but I just
Uh-huh.
knew I loved it. And I remember in elementary school, we went to go see Annie at this like
Classic.
local community theater, and I just was taken away. And then it kind of was followed by this, there was like a touring troupe that it was
Mm-hmm.
like black box theater sort of thing. They had just like one black box they brought, with props, random things, and I just was captivated.
Yeah.
And I think when I really started to get the bug, I just kind of did like, whatever summer camp things I could do. My
Mm-hmm.
brother and I would like, put on performances for our family members or literally anyone who would watch.
Uh-huh.
And it became this kind of safe zone, I think, for me to just fully express myself, because I think what I'm starting to realize now as I'm getting older and just self-reflective is it I felt like didn't have the freedom to fully express myself
Mm-hmm.
outside of this one thing. And so I think I just started to fall into that even more, and then it blossoms and it becomes, what it is to this day.
Sure. So commute there, and where specifically? Where'd you grow up?
Oh, Florida, Clearwater, Florida.
Clearwater, Florida.
Hmm.
Okay. I have a vague sense of Florida. I know West Palm Beach and I know Orlando. Where's Clearwater?
Oh, all right. West Palm, I'm on the other side of the coast.
Okay.
I'm on the Gulf of
On the
Mexico.
Gulf side.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So kind of maybe not like the swamplands of Florida, but still kind of like the cool part.
Right.
Kinda-
Yeah. You could like work your way in and not that far to kind of get to some kind of swamplands, but
uh-huh.
I was definitely more beachside, like 15 minutes away from the beach.
Which I feel like if you're gonna grow up in Florida or live in there, the beach is the
Oh,
only place to do it. Because if you're just like if you're not near the beach
right.
in Florida, like what's the point?
I will say, and I will say it's a bit of what I call a little secret for Florida. So, I hope it doesn't explode and kind of overwhelm the
Mhm.
Springs Institute or anything in Florida. But
Uh-huh.
our Florida springs are this like, oh my gosh, just gem. It's a gem. It is this like it feels like the secret oasis that not really everyone knows about, because yeah, our beaches are great, and I grew up on like one that TripAdvisor keeps naming number one, you know, every 3 years or so. But our springs are they're freshwater springs. There's, you know, a crack in the earth, and they're constantly, it's 72 degrees year round. So in the summer, it is just the most refreshing thing ever. Crystal clear. Manatees, you'll see them during their mating season in winter. It feels like life really slows down there in these like really unique pockets in Florida. And so even if you live around there, though, it is more kind of, I would say, like, it feels a little rednecky around the springs, but the beach, I mean, I would not have traded my childhood for anything. That was so special to be able to be so close to it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty spectacular. I grew up in southern Maryland on near the Chesapeake Bay. So I grew up on St. Leonard Creek, which is very famously a battle of the War of 1812 happened.
Okay, yes.
Near this creek. So I grew up similarly. I had fond memories of crabbing off of the dock with my mom, and trying to swim as much as possible before the jellyfish came in. You know, trying to catch eels in like the crab pots and stuff. Like all of that. Like some real Norman Rockwell shit. Like a lot of that kind of stuff. Like throwing the stick for my dog. That whole thing. So we're not too far off.
No, really not. Like that kind of outside play, I think, is like so essential. And I love to hear when like other people really got to have that in their childhood. Like,
oh yeah,
could you imagine who you are without having that? I feel like it was just imagination oasis.
Yes, that is where I learned to have an imagination, because grew up super rural area, didn't have a ton. I needed a ride to get to any of my friends' houses.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was just kind of like in the yard with like stuff to climb on, and like I was like, oh, and trees. I feel like there's less talk of climbing trees.
I am so
nowadays.
Glad that, oh my gosh. Well, I am so glad you brought this up. Oh my God, I have a love for climbing trees, and you're so right. No, we're not talking about it. Nobody's talking about it.
No, not anymore.
Not at all. Oh my God. What was your first kind of like, do you remember you're like, oh, I can climb this, and then you're climbing it and you're like, oh my God, I can keep going, you know?
I was probably like, I was young. I was under 10, definitely. And it was when I still lived, I grew up in two different houses in the same kind of general area. And there was a row of trees at the very far end of my first yard.
Okay.
And I remember I would always climb on this one on the left because I could get the most branches, get the best handholds. And I never went all the way up to the top, but I got at least 2/3 of the way up there. And I remember thinking, okay, I got this one. And then I did like another length of my body.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like hanging up there, looking around, and just really feeling like I was the boss of my own life in that moment.
Totally.
Just kind of hanging out there, because my parents were like, were probably off doing something else. It was that sort of. I just turned 37, so I don't know if this was different.
Happy birthday!
For you. Thank you. So we were sort of like I feel like that 90s kids sort of realm. We were right in that kind of sweet spot. Millennials get this a lot. We were like, oh, we remember like we were born in Reagan, but then we also like remember before the internet, and then we also adapt to the internet. We're not scared of it. But I also feel like in terms of parenting styles, we're on that sort of cusp where it wasn't the complete utter negligence of 70s kids, but we were just like, the helicopter wasn't winding up yet, but it was like on the tarmac, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put that. Oh yeah.
Like it was a sort of like, what's going on over there? All right. That sort of thing. So you were you were free, but like you wouldn't have to like set your own alarm before you got home or anything.
Right.
So I was curious if like that was, if it was like that for you. So in this like sort of like idyllic Florida sense with these springs and this beach.
Sure. That is so funny. The helicopter wasn't winding up yet. I hope that sticks with me forever. That is so good.
Well, it's recorded, so
I will. Oh, great! I'll have it forever. Oh, that is so. Yeah, you're so right. It was the sweet spot. Because I definitely remember a lot of times that I just remember my mom was so tired, like
oh yeah,
like my parents divorced at 7, and
oof.
my mom was a single mom and a school teacher. And
Oh, my mom was a teacher too.
oh really? What'd she teach?
4th and 5th grade.
Oh, okay. My mom, stayed in elementary school, but she was a VE resource teacher, so
Okay,
like
yeah.
ESC and like
Mhm.
IEPs and all that stuff. And so yeah, I'm sure get it too when you saw a lot of just like my mom is someone who cares and cares a lot, and
Oh yeah,
it really wore at her a lot with just how like the school system is
yeah,
and how that was. And so
and just trying to be there for those kids as much
yeah.
as she was able to.
Oh my gosh, she was the giving tree. Like she would bring kids like shoes home because they wouldn't be able to get washed, and like I remember gave our like Xbox because she works with a lot of like students that are on the spectrum, and
Uh-huh.
routine and structure is like is really important. And so
Yeah.
she got our Xbox to give to one of her students to use for the meantime while theirs had broken, because that was just really important to them. And I remember that's when we got our ring of death.
Oh
We
no.
didn't get it back, but it was okay because it kind of had we had phased out of
It had
it.
served
And
its purpose.
oh
We're
my
heading to the
God, did it serve?
360. Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It was like if it were to go out, at least it went out like that.
Uh-huh.
And so she just was tired a lot because
Mhm.
that's also an emotional toll to really have to carry.
Oh, 100%
Yeah.
it is. Like, because you have to care to be a good teacher. And like,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're dealing with kids that are coming from less advantageous circumstances,
Yeah.
or their parents don't care as much, like, oh my God, the weight of that, I can only imagine. Like
Yeah.
100%. Like, and we all realized it like during lockdown. It was like, oh, I got to do all this stuff now. Get them back in school so that the
Right.
teachers can deal with it.
Right.
Uh-huh. So she was like, so she was like very like caring and attentive, but exhausted. I know
Yes.
exactly that. So again, probably like some time alone with the imagination station.
Oh yeah. Oh
Uh-huh.
yeah. Definitely a lot of time alone with the imagination station. I also was just blessed. I grew up with like a group of neighborhood kids, and
Uh-huh.
oh my gosh, and we all just we were just outside all the time.
Yeah.
We had this kind of neighborhood that was tucked inside a larger neighborhood, and
Mhm.
so it was kind of just like really two bigger streets. It was enough for us to have walkie talkies and be able to run loose and then come back at dusk or when the street
Uh-huh.
lights turned back on. But we all definitely had each other and absolutely our imaginations, and that I
Yeah.
was known for that then, and even now they'll just they just have seen it all, the progress of what I tried to get everyone else to do then, and
Uh-huh.
kind of what I'm doing now. But yeah, did you have like a group of kids that you all played with outside? And
Yeah. Like in my old neighborhood, in the first house that I lived in, because the kids in my neighborhood in the second house, they weren't like super nice.
oh, that sucks.
But like growing up, I remember lots of times like friends would like walk down, and we would like basically like play instead of like playing house, we would play like whatever show we liked, and we'd be the
Oh,
characters
cool. Oh my God,
and
that's so
create our
cool.
own like little fanfics and stories like that we would act out in play. And I also remember going to I'm blanking on her name, but there was this girl who lived down the street from me, and I would like go over to her house, and we'd like jump on the trampoline and like
Yes.
all afternoon. So it's like, because I was an only child, so I think my parents wanted me to
Uh-huh.
socialize a little bit. So I definitely have those like very specific memories. And then as I got older, I had like a very like hardcore gamer phase for a little while. So from like probably like 5th grade all the way until my senior year of high school, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I have at least a picture from every year of me, my friend Chris, and our our friends Brian and Jason, and we would just play like Mario Party like for like 8 hours,
Yes.
like just all night long, and we would just be like talking about like bands we are getting into or other games, and then the other thing that I credit two important moments with my life turning out the way it has. My friend Chris McNamara, who I've mentioned on the show before, he got into theater in freshman year of high school. And then I didn't. I was still pretty introverted. And then he would he did not let it go. He's like, come audition. Come on, just
Chris.
Just audition. Just you got nothing to lose. Just audition. I was like, and then fall of sophomore year, I was like, okay, I will come to this audition.
He wore you down.
He did. And then it was a play called The Man Who Came to Dinner. I had one scene,
okay,
and that set the course of the rest of my life. And I started playing guitar the same year.
Wow.
That everything started happening. Like that was the first time, and maybe I don't know if you have a similar feeling, but I remember that was the first time I felt very passionate about something. I was not passionate about playing sports. I was not passionate about Boy Scouts or the outdoors, but when I got into doing theater, I was like, yeah, I'll come in and build sets on Saturday. I'll stay late after school. I'll get a ride. That was the first time I was like excited to work hard on something. That was pivotal for me. And I was curious, because you I feel like you sort of have to have the feeling to stay in this for any length of time, because it can be so brutal. So I was curious. So if there's community theater for you early on, and was your brother into this stuff as well? How many siblings do you have?
So I have a younger brother that was actively performing with me on the blankets in the living room.
Okay.
And I have an older half brother who no way in hell is he a performer, but he is so funny. Like I definitely think the comedy gene came on our dad's side of the family, because my younger brother too. I mean, that's I think we all have that one person in our life that everything we do is to try to make them laugh.
Yes.
And there is the opinion that matters. And I don't care, who you are. If as long as I can make this person laugh, that's it. And that's my younger brother. And so, yeah, that's the one who, we would just kind of put on anything that we could.
Well, do you remember the first time you saw comedy and had a concept of it being comedy, like if it was, I don't know if it was sketch or some other kind, or like late night or some kind of like cartoon or anything like that?
Yeah, so I this is like one of those things that I feel like I check back in with myself and ask this question again to just, I don't know. Like I feel like I'm always trying to kind of get to the root of that. And this is what I've come up with. And it's not like I saw this person on TV or I saw my mom laughing at SNL. Yeah, those happen. But what it was for me really was, okay, so it's like a specific type of like middle-aged man.
Okay.
That the way that I just saw this a lot from whatever like family events or whatever. They would kind of captivate the room, and they would just know what to say and when to say it. And a lot of the times I would see them too, they would do like impressions or kind of like alter their voice. And the kind of hold I saw that it had, like where you have no idea what they're going to say next, and it hits hard every time. That was like, whoa, somebody can be this, somebody can do this. Like I latched on to that, and I think it really stuck with me. Like older, it seems to be like the older they get too, like just like older funny gay men too. Like when I saw like younger as well, they just the way that they would just be so quippy, so sharp, and just I'm like, it's captivating. It was so captivating.
Yeah, like when you see someone like really holding court at a party. No, I know exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, and you just think, oh man, they seem like they're so cool.
Yes.
No, yeah, absolutely. Not too dissimilar to like when you see like cool kids in like high school shows. I feel like it's a similar kind of energy, and it's again like we talk about these like little plays that we grew up kind of writing for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's almost like that's like the top of non-performances, like when you see someone like really being funny or holding court at a
Right.
party, or telling like a really captivating story.
Uh-huh.
Like I
Yes.
remember just because I do lots of storytelling shows too. Like when you are like when you see someone at the Moth or some kind of show like that, and
Mm-mm.
they're like really getting into telling like a really compelling, perilous kind of story. I'm doing all my plosives, really like captivating story. It's like it's like a black hole. Like you can't ever nothing can
Mm.
escape the compelling narrative.
Oh my God, that's such a great way to put that. That yeah, that's so true. It is this kind of it kind of goes back to just that one singular line of focus in that flow state. I think that a great compelling story like that grants the audience access to zone in on this one thing with no distractions for like this X amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that is really such a gift.
Hmm.
It is such a gift. And it's such an odd way to kind of I feel like be introduced to this larger thing, but I also think it feels like it's the most kind of natural form of it.
No, I agree 100%. I remember, not to go on too much about myself here, but I remember I wrote my thesis in college was about comedy as an engine for social change, and I
Ah.
specifically cited the oral tradition of human beings, like before even like written words, like when we're just like around fires and regaling folks, or even if we were
Yeah.
just like as like even I'm trying to think if we were
Mm.
just like at the end of like regaling the tales of like a ancient battle or something like that. It's like, oh man, that was pretty intense, but man was I awesome. And like that, like there's a certain kind of oral tradition
Yes,
that I
there is.
think is
Yeah.
inherent in human nature, like that hasn't gone away. The same way I heard the phrase negativity bias, like the reason we're kind of drawn towards like clickbaity, like negative titles on YouTube or social
Mhm.
media is because that's the same part of our brain that was like wired to look out for like
Oh.
saber-toothed tigers and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like
Oh,
similarly
interesting.
on a on a more positive end, that sort of like oral tradition of like being drawn to like a compelling narrative is, I feel like, very innate in the human
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, you're right. I mean that's it's kind of like our oldest art form is
Yeah.
is that, and I think that that's kind of what natural historians were, or like documentarians is you would just tell the tales of what happened in the village, right next to you, because maybe, someone at your village couldn't be able to physically go, so you carry a piece of this with them and you're able to share it. It is. Yeah, it's so primal, I think, for us. It's like
Yeah.
it does tap into this thing that it's at our core. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. I could totally see like if we were alive in like the 1700s, like
Uh-huh.
the niche we'd carve out for ourselves is like reenacting gossip from like the town over.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we're down here in like soot covered New York. And
Right.
then we take a carriage up to Sleepy Hollow. And it's like let's what's happening
Oh my
in New
God.
York and is
That is such a funny idea. That is,
totally.
my mind is like racing right now. That's hilarious because like it's up to then that person that decided that this is the story that I'm going to share. So
Yes.
then it's out of their lens and it's out of their perspective. So it could have just been like, I saw a tree get chopped down versus like something that it was, something pivotal like in history and time. It's up to that person, whoever that person is that is carrying that story or that gossip.
Yes, and then that person, maybe the first time they tell is like, I saw a tree get chopped down, but then maybe by like the third or fourth time they start to learn is like, the forest was angry, but I
Yes.
was mightier.
Oh my gosh,
And then
yes.
they become the center of the story, like, and then that's how you get these like Homeridian kind of odysseys and these tall tales and like the whole like George Washington cherry tree kind of story. Like you
Right.
build that folklore, and then eventually sometimes I feels like maybe like those ancient myths, sort of like a game of telephone, but like there's like a core kind of idea you're trying to convey, and you're just trying to make it sound the coolest that
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
Which I think about a lot in comedy too. Is like, yeah, I could tell the true version of a story, or I could tell the funniest, coolest way of doing this story.
Oh, totally. You're totally. And that I think that yeah, that's something that I just like with us, it's like reps, and it's like however often you went over to the next village to share that, and you could see the reaction of different ones. Oh my, that was like their open mic. It's essentially what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They go back. You had to be a little more careful. This is in the Quill days. You had to
Right.
rewrites took a lot longer.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
So when did you first like get into performing? Because I know you as a director and
Mhm.
from being at the pit, but I'm curious. Like, would you consider? Do you do sketch? Do you do improv? Did you ever do stand up? I know you have a theater background, so you're doing so. We're watching compelling people at parties.
Mhm.
So where does the idea? When does the idea to? Did you go to school for theater, or did you start doing theater at a point?
Yeah, so I went to school for environmental science and policy.
Nice.
And it's because my mom was a teacher,
Uh huh.
and she couldn't support me,
Right.
in college, outside of college, and academics were really important. And I knew I was like, I don't know how useful a theater degree will be for me if I don't want to, just use it to teach or something.
Sure.
So, alongside growing up, I've gone to oceanography camps and theater camps at the same time. So it was kind of when it came down to the study of it all, I was like, all right, let me study the thing that may benefit the world if I end up using it.
Uh huh.
And then alongside that, I so alongside my degree, I was doing community theater and like learning from everyone else who was like my castmates and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was a sponge, and trying to take in lessons from everyone that I worked with. Like all the directors, all of my castmates, even production of building the sets. I just tried to like learn and soak in as much.
Uh huh.
And so by the time I graduated, I started to audition a bit more, and I got into dinner theater then.
Uh huh.
And I was doing that, and that was filling me for sure. But I did have this other side where I wanted to kind of explore more improv, because in 2016 I started doing some short form stuff.
Uh huh.
And then it was 2018, 2019 where I was kind of had a long form program where I had never seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Amy Poehler's book that really kind of like brought me into what UCB was and all
Uh-huh.
of that. And so that's where I started to get into improv, and then from
Uh-huh.
improv I got into sketch. And took as many sketch writing classes as I could, because I was like, oh, this is the baby of like, this thing and this other thing where I can integrate improv to help the writing, but I can use the acting with sketch. And it just felt like this real nice kind of Venn diagram blend of everything. Um, and yeah, so then alongside that, I just kind of kept going and tried to really just do everything I could and say yes to everything on both sides.
Sure.
And then just kind of let life kind of carve out the path for me,
Uh-huh.
versus just like having a a designated endpoint. It was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna see where this pushes. My plosive was so bad on that.
Oh, that's totally
See
fine.
where that pushes me, and it kind of has brought me here. So yeah, that sort of was that journey for me.
Fantastic, because the journey is very important. I think I think undervalued, in that you should have fun along the ways to wherever you get going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know a lot of comedians who I think fell to the trap of like, once I'm successful, then I'll be happy, and then that's not a
Oh, I
great way to
know.
live. So that's I love
Yeah.
I love this for you. So you're literally like, so like environmental science,
Yeah.
and then you're doing so Uh, I have a few, so many things I want to ask.
Okay.
So you're doing environmental science and
Yeah.
dinner theater at the same time. So like you're absorbed in this local, and is this still in Florida?
Yeah, yes and no. So, after high school, I had gotten a scholarship to go to Hawaii Pacific University.
Hawaii?
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's a great place to study environmental stuff.
Yeah, because initially it was marine biology, what I wanted to get
Uh-huh.
into. And then it was actually my time in Hawaii when I saw like the culture and how much they appreciated the Aina. And Aina for them is that's what land is, soil, earth. And I saw in a more broad sense what I could kind of have an impact on, or just at least learn as much of this sphere that I can, and find a way to almost integrate that with performing arts. I honestly still haven't found that sweet spot blend, but
Mm-hmm.
um so I was there, and then a knee injury brought me back to Florida, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's when I officially changed the major, and here we are.
Fascinating. So on an environmental, Ben, this is something I've been thinking about a lot because I wanted to be a marine biologist when I
Oh,
was a kid as
get
well.
out of here.
Yes,
Well,
I was
yes.
obsessed. I was obsessed with. I wanted to study sharks and,
Yeah.
and dolphins. I
Uh-huh.
really, and I still want to like cage dive with great whites at some point
Me
in my life.
too. Oh my
I
gosh.
really want to do that. So on
Oh, cool,
on
cool,
an
cool.
environmental bit, because um, growing up on the Chesapeake Bay, it's a very fragile ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I'm concerned about when it comes to ocean health is this. I believe it's Atlantic garbage patch. This
Oh,
are you familiar with this? This kind of big swirling mass of plastic that's been gradually
yeah.
broken down. That's just like the size of a pretty large landmass.
Yeah.
How do we get all this plastic out of the
Oh
ocean, and
man.
then what do we? So that's probably like number one. But then the other thing is, well, even if could collect it all, where does it go
Yeah.
next? There's no good place for it to go, really, is there?
Yeah. So this is something I think about often too. Is like how do we approach this? Yeah, I think it's in the Pacific, and I think it's kind of like off of Texas, if I'm correct. I could be completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is massive. I think the comparatives of size is like, it's appalling.
Yes.
How big this is. And plastic specifically is it's such an issue with the ocean as well, just because of microplastics. So
Right, and it
that
gets in the food chain, and then we're all eating
oh yeah.
plastic, and then
Yeah, that like it dissolve, especially like the garbage patch. It That's the larger debris, and that is an immediate problem right
mm-hmm.
now for a different set of reasons of what microplastics are for problems.
Right,
Because especially with the sun, the salt water eroding, like that is accelerating the path of the microplastics dissolving, and yeah, it's getting into the fish, it's getting into the fish we eat. It is it's it is so interesting, this predicament that we're in, because it's because of us that this synthetic thing is invasive into
right,
all of these natural environments. And the ocean is like one of the biggest carbon reservoirs that we have, and it stores so much carbon, and carbon's one of the gases that is, why, it's contributing to the heating, which is heating our planet,
climate
climate change,
change,
and
yeah,
then there's just so much just interweaving
mm-hmm.
about it. But it's interesting because I think every avenue has their own solution for this. Like, I know, I'll see articles that, we found the phytoplankton that help, or the algae that eat and digest plastic with, their enzymes. Like, it's this specific, organism that has this specific enzyme that is going to
Right,
be the thing that saves the thing. um and and then for, like, the mycology, mushroom people, about, the decomposers, how do we use them to decompose plastic? And I think it's just this weird kind of crossroads of like this massive synthetic invasive thing into the natural environment, and it's that battle back and forth.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a few companies that are doing some stuff with the larger debris, like One Ocean, I think, is the
Mm-hmm.
wristbands, and you never really. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know what the solution is, and I think it's good that we all talk about this. Like, what would you propose? If
That's the thing. Unless because it's such a massive amount
mm-hmm.
of synthetic material that has to be collected. It's a massive logistical undertaking.
Yeah.
And then in terms of how what do you do if it there? I remember, and I'm like vaguely half remembering something. I remember seeing something about a woman who figured out how to basically make bricks
Mm-hmm.
out of the trash
Yeah.
plastics.
Yeah.
And like this could also be a solution for not only all this trash plastic, but there's also
The
these materials
housing.
that can help with housing
Mm-hmm.
in parts of Africa that really need these materials. So there was like how do but then I think of the question is scaling that.
Right. When I found out that about the making the bricks, I just was mind blown. I thought it was the coolest thing, and
Yeah.
it really, yeah, it's like we have this thing here. Oh my God, can we like help? If not solve two problems, like get a lot closer towards the solution of these two problems. And it
Mm-hmm.
felt like that was really pivotal, as especially building materials is plays such a large role as far as carbon output and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, but yes, the bricks. Where was I? Oh, I mentally wanted to go somewhere with these bricks.
I really loved that idea.
Oh.
Another thing that kind of freaks me out is because again talking about maritime history is there's I think a couple examples of this, but the one I can remember is the USS Thresher,
Uh-huh.
nuclear powered submarine
Oh,
that sank. So not only did it and it's still
jeez.
there,
Yes.
and so like there's like a full on like because I grew up, my dad worked at a nuclear power plant. I
Oh,
grew up
get out of
20
here.
minutes from in my part of Maryland. So
Oh, whoa.
I literally grew I literally grew up like 20 minutes from like nuclear materials, which my wife seems to think explains a lot about me.
Stop.
um, but like the fact that there's just like a full on like nuclear reactor essentially just
Right.
chilling on the bottom of the ocean
Yeah.
is unnerving to me.
Yeah. Like wow, I have a lot of questions now for you too, for like what are your thoughts on nuclear? Given like you clearly had a close peek behind the curtain, with your dad working.
Well, my dad's pretty pro nuclear as far as like efficiency and
Yeah.
cost. So I guess sort of my opinion is that when it works, it's
Right.
pretty good, but
Yeah.
the problem is that
Mhm.
it only needs to not work once for it to fuck up a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like suddenly like I'm just like, oh, living my life, I'm climbing trees, and then the next thing you know, somebody's like studying me, wondering like,
Oh.
oh, what was he doing right before he
Yeah,
got turned
right.
into like a Pompeii guy.
Oh my gosh. I think about that often, of like what is the last thing I'm doing before I die, and does that need to be investigated? And
Right.
that's a separate thought, but I think I mirror your thoughts exactly on this too. For nuclear, it's the how to contain,
Yeah,
and if it goes
100%.
wrong is that's the big thing, because otherwise, oh man, if it didn't have that one thing, oh God, we'd be in such a different position, I think.
Oh yeah, exactly. So you're wrestling with these. So I could totally see the reason if you're answering with these like big, like planet saving kind of not only logistical problems but ethical
Yeah,
quandaries.
yeah,
I
ethical, yeah.
imagine having some sort of artistic release would be very invaluable for you from a mental health perspective, at the very
Oh
least.
my gosh, absolutely, absolutely. That's so true. Like, because if I really didn't have this thing, I don't know what I would do. It because I feel like I can channel once again just so much of like just angst, anxiety. I can pump it into a character and like, and that character, usually I love playing big characters. I love, yeah, big characters, and also characters that are just inherently flawed and like clearly have their quirks and are really off, but there is that kind of quality that I relate to this person because I'm seeing them when they've just lost it. We've all had those moments too, and I think if I didn't get to just drive it into that, I don't know where the fuck I would be, right? Probably down there with the nuclear. Yeah,
just sinking to the bottom of the
sinking
ocean.
Right down. Yeah.
Oh man, that feeling metaphorically is so relatable. So
yeah.
I'm glad that you found this thing. So you're doing theater. So were you doing like, if you were doing like serious plays, like what kind of stuff were you doing? Did you ever do like comedies?
Yeah, so I did serious plays, I did comedies, and I love them both in their own aspects. Like I love a good drama. I do, because it just gets you to tap into other things that probably I repress and I just push down, and I wait for the day that I get to use it on stage for whatever that calls for.
Yeah.
And the dinner theater was just catering to its audience, and those were all farces. So I did do a lot of comedies there, and a lot of just like
broad slapsticky kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
like plays from like the 50s and 60s.
They love Neil Simon, love him. They love him.
Love Neil Simon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. And
Gotcha.
So you name it, that was always a safe zone to lock into. And I will say it was really, really cool, especially where it was in like Clearwater, Tampa area, that I got a lot of people that I got to kind of like I would place them as my mentors without them knowing, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And once they caught on, they would, oh, please call me anytime you need it. And I would like, if they offered extra rehearsals, I always took it. I was like, because this is a one-on-one type thing that I get to have. And then I had a lot of people that like were retired in Florida, but they had lived 44 years out here in New York, like doing the thing. Like my director in Florida, like taught at Lee Strasberg, and my vocal coach that my grandma knew, like had taught at Hofstrom. It lived out, and like so I got like, I knew it was special as it was happening too, but like, and even getting to act alongside like people who had done off-Broadway and stuff, and they just had retired, and that was that. And I was like, oh, there's something special here, where I'm glad that I get to learn this thing in this like real-time school, essentially. That part was just, I still think how cool it is, and how that's kind of happening right now, I'm sure, to people living here, and then they're going to go retire in different states, and those young, eager artists will get to enjoy that, have a slice of that.
Oh, totally. I know exactly what you mean. Like, I really want to be like, become like an elder statesman of the comedy scene, in like a really supportive way. Like I like whenever, because especially like I'm around the pit a lot. I mean, a lot of younger comics, younger performers and comedians and such. And so like I'm starting to like realize like, man, I have been doing this for a long time, and I'm still I feel like that kind of keeps me young and with it for sure.
Yeah.
I like the energy of that place, because I spent a lot of years in angry basements.
Yeah, the energy is great, and it's truly the people. Like, I mean, God, it's so special. Everyone that you walks through that door, like, it's just, you're able to click with them on this like basic level already. The fact that they're in that place, and then next is just the gift of everything else that brings.
Oh, totally. And then, so how did you end up get to New York after? We're saving the world. We're doing dinner. We're doing dinner theater. We're getting like a full sense of the discipline. So we're following this path. We're seeing where it takes us. How does it get you up I-95?
Up I-95. I love it. How does it get you up I-95? I had stayed. I knew for me my next step was, where am I going to do the thing that I love to do.
Yep.
And I'd stayed with a friend in LA during the pandemic, during one of the summers, and I got a little slice of that and I loved it, but it was so similar to home too. And it's not really much of a place for live performance. But the
Right.
Groundlings did catch my eye, and that was the Groundlings and clowning. The fact that LA has that was kind of like a bit of a shiny piece that I kind of had in the back of my mind. And I had come back home to Florida after that. I had like my lease ended with at my apartment, and I moved in back home because I was like, the next place I move, I'm not gonna pay any more rent in Florida. I'm not gonna, I need to just do this next place that has the thing, because I had started to just like, it started to just kind of like tire out in Florida. Like
Yeah.
people would start to just call me so I could just kind of plug and play into their thing, and I'm like, no, I need to audition against other people. Like, you need to still give other people like chances. And I was doing it with the same ring of people, and it just was like, I was looking around me and I was like, if I don't get out now, I, I can easily come back and do this thing, and because
Right.
it had been working, and I loved everyone I was working alongside, but I knew there was this next thing. And my neighbor actually was the one that told me. She was like, she's my mom's age, and she kind of pulled me aside and she's like, listen, if you don't move out now, it was like, it was this time last year, actually. She was like, if you don't do this now, you're not gonna do it. And what a shame that would be. And so I was like, oh, fuck, I need something to like hold me accountable to this thing, to the move. And so I was like looking at whatever classes I could take up here, to at least, like, the goal was to be out here a month and like take whatever classes I could and then see if I could stay. So if I did it right, I wasn't coming back. So
Right.
I was looking, and Juilliard offers, like, with their extension division, kind of it was like I took the Alexander technique and like a scene study class, and I found an Airbnb for a month.
Okay.
And so and it was covering the duration of me doing these classes there.
Right.
And so I then had something that I had like invested in, money, like with the
Yep.
and so that I just needed something to tie myself accountable to it. And so yep, that's what brought me out here. It was actually May 31st at 11 p.m. I have a picture when I just arrived to my Airbnb. So the 1 year is rapidly approaching.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The first year in New York is a big one, 100%. Like, because once you realize, oh, I lasted.
Yeah.
Like, the routine, and it's a pretty big accomplishment. So I commend you on that. So you've only been in New York for a relatively short period
Yeah, I'm
of time
fresh.
now.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, I'm coming up on year 13, I think.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
You passed the 10 mark. That's big. That's
I
big.
did. I've held on for
That's
over
awesome.
a decade. So, and I still love it as much as I did when
Oh.
I first moved here. I've loved this when New York was kicking me in the teeth, and I love it now, even and now things are going pretty well for me, all things considered. So I still love it. So I'm excited to hear that. So you were saying you did things at UCB. How did you come to find the pit? And are you like on staff at the pit? Are you like a director of something?
Yeah. I'm currently the director of classes, and I just found the job on Playbill. Because
Nice.
when I came out here, I was just doing different freelancing stuff, like writing and editing and just whatever I could get my hands on.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's what kind of brought me into it. And I was like, oh, let me learn about the theater that I'm applying to, and started interviewing with. And that's kind of what brought me to check it out. And I was offered the job, and I signed my lease out here on the same day. And so I was like, oh, well, all right. So that clears that, hey, everyone back home in Florida, I'm not coming back. Like
Right.
I left so many friends very confused, and I am
Uh-huh.
so sorry for that. And that was me internally trying to like deal with this thing like
Mm-hmm.
externally, but also like how am I gonna do this? I can't answer your questions. I don't know if I'm coming back at
Right.
all of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff. So that's kind of what had put me there. But I was also curious for you, like what was I'm so curious what everyone's push was to get out here. Like what was
Hmm.
that final thing for you to bring you out here?
I think that when I was in college, I felt like I always felt like in my heart, like New York is where I wanted to
Oh,
be.
okay.
I feel like that's specifically what I want to do because at the time I was very focused on theater. Like film acting was not even like a thing I was
Right.
thinking about yet. And I liked the idea of not having to have a car and have that expense. And
Yeah, that's
I
true.
I had seen I'd seen so much art depicted in New York,
Mm.
and I loved Rent, so I really had
Yeah.
those kinds of experiences in mind, even if it was going to be expensive and it was going to be rough and all these things. And then going from studying theater to then starting stand up comedy,
Mm-hmm.
every comic I met who would come down from New York was like, move to New York. That's the place you'll be able to get more stage time. You'll meet a ton of people. You'll get really good doing comedy in New York. And so I think I was just drawn to it. And then it was just a matter of sticking it out at my soul sucking call center job to save some money.
Yeah.
That was that, and that was what it was. But yeah, I think I'd always my heart always told me New York. I love
Mm.
California. I love LA, but I think I'm just like in my element here,
Yes.
even though I've come from the middle of nowhere, which is hilarious to my parents. They're like, man, he's like big city. He's been up there for so long.
That I mean, so long. That is all a big congrats to you, and
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
you for yourself too. Like what you were saying earlier, kind of like circling back of like, especially with stand up too. It's like you have to really show up for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think comedy and especially New York, just kind of you have to show up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ultimately, I feel like that's kind of the lesson I've learned out here so far. But especially with you being out here 13 years, it's like you didn't just show up for yourself once. You made a choice, a distinct choice to keep showing up for yourself, and
Yes.
clearly you still do, and especially like you said, when it beats you down, but and also when you're doing great, it's like
Yeah.
through it all, you just have to just give yourself that kind of I'm here for me, I'm here for myself to be able which is that's a hard concept for me too, which is why I think especially all of us kind of in this performing thing, we love to give it to someone else, but it
Mm-hmm.
is so hard to be able to give any ounce of that in
Oh yeah.
return. But yeah, I think that is just a great example of what happens when you do is
Mm-hmm.
you're yeah, I mean 13 years is awesome,
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and the thing is like after a while you're just here and you've been doing it because I and not to pontificate too much, but like I never got into I when I started doing performance, I just liked it. I
Yeah.
didn't even really think I've never even thought a goal of like being famous. The only reason I wanted any kind of notoriety is because I saw it as an ends to work. I was just looking for jobs,
Sure.
basically. And then I email Ronnie. So if you've been here years, so this is probably like I don't know. You probably don't remember the pit, like the underground and the big theater back on 24th Street.
No, but I hear stories.
So those were cool. Those were really cool spots. And I remember just emailing and running into the former like head of tech, Ronnie, and he just showed me how to do the board. And I do a grad show to kind of learn the
Oh
ropes.
yeah.
And then Chris and Mike just happened to be watching that graduation
Get
show,
out of
and
here.
they were like, whoever the manager was like, oh man, that the tech was really good. Who was the tech? And they were like, oh, it's him. And it was like, hey, do you want to do our show? And I was
Oh
like,
my
sure.
God.
And then that was, and then I blinked, and that was 7 years ago now.
Wow. Wow.
And then And
Damn.
especially lately, now coming out of the pandemic, I'm getting so many like offers to do tech things,
Yeah.
and now I'm just one of the people who've been doing it the longest, and that's really exciting.
I want to ask you too, like what solocom was like for you to tech, because talk about like a tech mammoth undertaking.
Solocom was fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun. It was what was great about it is, and the thing I don't know if you knew about this, but we had a major internet outage the
Oh,
day of
jeez.
the in the morning. Oh, you're fine. In the morning, so there were a few people's texts like I couldn't even download their assets
No.
until like they were walking into the room because
Holy
I'm like
shit.
super. I love being early and setting up stuff. Like I got stuff next week that I would really like to get set up before people start coming in.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of like, and of course the one show was like the most change heavy one.
No.
So I'm literally like during their tech setting their Q lab up, and luckily the other shows weren't as tech heavy. It was stand up, and so I just had to put up the names and
Okay.
and what have you. But the first time I ever did this very tech heavy show for this person was in front of the audience. So it's like
Oh
just
my
like
God.
following the script and like okay, and we'll go from that, and okay, I think she wants that like then. So
Mm.
that was a pretty intense experience. But but not outside the realm of stuff I'd done before, because routinely with Backdoor Barbecue,
Mm-hmm.
I get uh, Mike and I are putting the news jokes in day of the
Oh,
show,
right, right,
like in
right.
the half hour before we go on, and sometimes it's not the most like. Probably not the most like seamless Q lab. Maybe I'm hitting escape a few times, but
Oh,
it still works.
yeah.
But I kind of love that. Kind of love that stuff because I really put a lot of. Uh, I really try to do as good a job as I can for those, because to me a lot of
Oh,
times I'm like
totally.
I'm supporting those folks on stage, and sometimes that that's cue needs to happen right then for that joke to
Mm-hmm.
work.
Yes.
So I really
Yeah.
try to. So it was really great, and then what was also great, I just had one of the performers I tech for on the show, like one of the funniest. It's one of the funniest episodes I've done. Jameer Pond, do you know him?
No, I don't.
Incredibly funny storyteller. He tells this great story about I won't spoil it here, but he has an amazing story that ends with a diss track being written about him.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
tell you off the air.
Okay.
But incredible conversation, and like I wouldn't have met some of these people
Right.
if not for doing Silicon, or I wouldn't have met you for like not
Yeah.
not saying like I need a side hustle in fall of 2016. There's a lot of stuff going on in fall of 2016.
Oh, gee. Yeah, that was
So I
a.
was like I needed another thing to kind of focus on, but to be here and to like really like I'm doing it. Like I'm really
Absolutely.
like the thing I wanted to do when I was a kid, uh, looking forward to graduating high school and moving to New York, is to work in the arts. And
Mm,
I've been able to do
mm.
that for a number of years. And that's exciting to me. Like I still feel like if I looked back and talked to that kid all those years
Oh,
ago,
yeah.
that he'd be like,
Ugh.
you're doing it. And then the other thing I'm also thinking about is my cool cousin, one of my cool cousins on my dad's
Yeah, we
side,
love a cool cousin.
uh, likes to share like the family history with me, and one of the ancestors on the Carey side was a patron of the arts, somehow directly
Oh,
related to supporting like Shakespeare's company
no
or
way.
something similar to that. So she likes to think, oh, like there's a family history of working in the arts. So I feel like feel like in a roundabout way is my destiny.
It does. I will say, especially too with like the Backdoor Boys as well, with like how their story of how they've come together,
Uh huh.
and then with how you said you had met them, also feels very like destiny. Um, it, it's really interesting too, because I think it's like kind of going back, and it's like if I didn't just kind of like arbitrarily choose yes to this thing,
Uh huh.
where would my life put me? Like with you, and like, oh, all right, let me do this side hustle, and then it launches you into this world, and then I'm sure then like what was that switch for you two from side hustle to, oh yeah, there's this like extreme like artistic aspect to tech that that you started to see? Like, when was that switch from like, yeah, I'm just doing this for money to, oh, I can kind of have my creative, license here?
It was something that Mike said. And it was probably a couple of years ago because I'd always kind of viewed myself as like separate from the group. Like
Oh,
I'm the tech for the group. And then there was a time when Mike and I were hanging out afterwards. It's like, no, it's our group.
yeah.
And I felt very included in that moment. So that was definitely one of those. And then they were always really great about um asking for input, or like, oh, I have an
Mm-hmm.
idea for, like, even before I started like working on jokes and integrating things, like when they would have guest performers, I was the guest performer once. I would like run down and
Oh,
run
yes.
back up. So I would do things like that. And I was always like kind of or and I know there's a roundabout way of answering this question. One of the other things I would do is when I would like get asked to tech jams
Okay.
or improv shows or stand up. A lot of times, what I would start doing is if a particular song or artist was mentioned in somebody's set, I would really quickly find that song and play it, and that would always get a reaction.
That always is. It is so satisfying as an audience member when that happens. Like,
Yeah.
that is so speedy on your end to be able to do that.
Yeah, so I would have a ton of fun doing that. So that was definitely part of it as well. And then I just got really into the new board and setting up things. And my wife has a theater background as well, so she's
Oh,
like,
awesome.
when the new board got installed, she's like, oh, I know that board. It's like, so I
Oh,
was like, oh, well,
nice.
maybe you come and teach me how to use it
Yeah, because
sometime.
none of
Um,
us definitely do. We do not know what we're doing with
yeah,
that board.
yeah, but we're gonna figure it out.
Yes, absolutely.
So something else I'd love to ask you here, because otherwise I'll keep you here all night, because I've been really enjoying this conversation.
Me too.
I like to manifest stuff on the show, like to
Oh,
talk about
okay.
some of our ideas for projects.
Yes.
So what is something? Let's talk about anything that you've got going on at the pit right now outside of the directing of the classes. Let's talk about that, and then let's talk about what would you want to do next,
Mm.
be it a show or some kind of program at the pit. What would that look like?
Oh, I've thought about this already, and I'm starting to have it kind of come back into full view of, as far as like, should I kind of think about this again? Um, so I was a part of this sketch team, and it's kind of dissolved and kind of has a new form, and it's more taking on like a sketch collective that
Mm-hmm.
it's like very newborn right now. Um, but me personally, as far as like kind of like creative domain of it, I think you should leave.
Uh huh.
Tim Robinson.
Yep.
I think you should leave. I love absurd. I love that kind of like zoning in on um, awkward humor. And that's a great example too of, I think, like a character flaw, and being able to really lean into that. And um, I would love to have together like a female or non-binary version of like, I
Uh
think
huh.
you should leave, and kind of like have this little group of that, and really kind of like get into the weeds of that, like that
Like lean
ideally.
into the
Oh yes.
surrealism and the
Oh,
absurdity.
absolutely. Like, that is
Uh
so
huh.
juicy to me, and I can't wait for season 3 to drop this month. I am so excited.
I know, right? Oh, it's gonna be great.
So good. It's going to be so good.
I cannot wait. Like I can literally feel like the way. And I also love Sam Richardson. I
Oh,
just want to.
what a team.
I just want to see him. I got to find out how I can watch Detroiters,
Yeah, me too. Me too.
because
Yes.
I never saw it when it was on Comedy Central.
Right.
But it's got to be streaming somewhere. But that I've heard such good things about that, and yeah, the first two seasons are just like I can totally see why he would be too weird for SNL, but I
Totally.
am so glad that he has a place where he
Yeah.
can exist in all of his weirdness.
Absolutely.
It's
Definitely. Like, we're all benefiting from this.
100%. Like finding out like something so surreal and absurd. For me, when I was a kid, it was Ren and Stimpy. That was my exposure to like something that's just completely bonkers and nonsensical. To really like see like how far like you can stretch like the bounds of reality almost,
right.
and then come back is really cool and exciting to watch.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that like within every sketch of his, he finds a way to do that in some way, shape, or form, which is, it's just so exciting. And it almost becomes like, I think like this kind of like spectacle or social experiment of like, like how would somebody react, keep it grounded? Like, I think there's like the voice of reason aspect to be able to play with that too. Which is so juicy and fun. So that is definitely something that it's kind of always in the back of my mind. And I think about if I would want to also just kind of expand the solo show or workshop that more. But I do love collaboration, and I love riffing with people, and all of what can be born from that is just, it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, you have a solo show as well?
So I did for SoloCom.
Cool.
I did like a 15-minute spot, and I was generally happy with it. It was really painful to be able to watch back, obviously, whatever. We're all,
Oh, I know what you mean. I've got the hour-long solo show that needs kind of a reworking.
Oh, nice.
And then I have like the gems. I have a bunch of solo stories that are mostly travel related that I could see building into something. I think what I might try to do next time is, because this is something I learned from my last music project, is like the next time I record something musically, I want a producer. So maybe like the next time I start working on the solo show again, I have a director, or at least someone I bounce ideas off of, to just kind of build that from the ground up. And then also the other thing is like, so much of it was just like kind of like a set list and like working out the jokes and the dialogue on stage. I want to like do something which I haven't done too much of lately, is like really sit down, hammer out a god awful draft, and then go back and revise it.
Yeah. So that would be your thing.
Yeah, that's gonna be my thing. I would love to get that special that's solo show to the point where I could like comfortably film it, put it out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And then move on to the next thing.
That's a really good goal, because I think personally too, what you learn from yourself in that process, as far as like a solo show go, the amount of breakthroughs that I had leading up to it was wild. I didn't actually expect any of that to happen, and it did. But before I lose this train of thought too, have you? What about you and Paul doing something with like musical comedy?
Paul and I have talked a lot about, well, first off, Paul's songs for Backdoor.
Yeah.
I want to record a bunch of them.
Oh my gosh.
I really want to.
Absolutely.
I really want to get that to happen. And then I never broached this with Paul, but I'll broach it with you now. I had this vague idea. I had this kind of idea because Paul comes on here every year.
Yeah.
At around Hanukkah, and we talk about the pop punk moments of the year because we love that stuff. I almost wanted to do like our version of like Wayne's World, but for pop punk.
Totally. Oh my God, yes.
Where it's just like us talking about stuff we like. And then I had an idea for a segment called Generational Divide, where I bring on some of like the really young performers, and they just make us feel old for like 10 minutes. It's just like so my seminal album of middle school you were not alive for.
Right.
Or it's like, okay, Fall Out Boy is classic rock to you, Foo Fighters is dead rock to you, okay. Like
so funny.
Like that's the whole idea now. But like I just feel like I would have fun doing that.
It's so masochistic. I love it. It's like who can I bring on so I can feel the absolute shittiest of myself right now? That's so great.
Exactly. And then as my burgeoning elder statesman status at the pit grows, I could find more and more people to just be like, hey, do you remember all these bands? Okay, well then come talk to me about it.
You could build a network. It sounds like you could really kind of get this whole thing like self-sustaining.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a funny idea. I really think you should explore that with
I,
Paul.
oh,
Absolutely.
I absolutely will. And if you ever needed to like do like a one-off like storytelling thing, I'm sure we could both find like an hour on like a dead weekend or a dead night.
Oh
We could
yeah.
do like each do like 20 minutes each to work on stuff if you ever
Yeah.
wanted to do that.
I always, yes, absolutely, totally.
Awesome.
And I wanted to know too, like, what, how, just because I do like the part of the process of it all is what kind of brought you to your premise of your solo show, given an hour as well.
Given an hour, I basically I had a couple of stories that I felt like I could string into a narrative.
Uh huh.
And they specifically where I'll give you the set list I was talking about right now. I'll be super transparent. The first story was about when my parents got divorced and
Mm-hmm.
like this inciting incident for that. The second story was how me and my best friend in college had a falling out over a girl.
Ah.
Then there was me moving to New York City, moving in with a stripper, and the time that the cops kicked my door down.
All right.
And then there was the time I accidentally hooked up with a engaged woman.
No,
Uh,
no.
and then to how I met my current wife and how she found out the other side of the story of my parents getting divorced
Oh.
and how it was not as clear cut as I had been led to believe
Oh,
and
whoa.
and reconfiguring that story
Oh.
and that script in my head. So the original name for the show was Laughing Through the Sad. And
Mm.
that was too one dimensional.
Yeah.
I'm at a different place in my life right now. Now I think the title of the show is going to be called Fighting My Wiring. Like
Ooh.
all of the things that happen that
Ooh.
make you act a certain way,
Right.
uh, just trying to like get in there, like pull out all the wires and plug them in different places and just try to react to things differently than I had been.
That's kind of like the ultimate, I think, like healthy version of this thing. Like that sounds like kind of the intention of what a solo show is, right? Is
Yeah,
like kind of you kind of taking account of like what has happened in my previous life, like what sets me off, what are my triggers, what are the things that
yeah,
I see the patterns here, but then let me actively like break them and rewire and just use the awareness in a direction that is going to be beneficial.
hmm
Oh, that is that as you were like saying this, that I love the order of the set list, I will say too, because it is just increasing, I think, in entropy. Like I think like the chaos builds starting from that first one. And
oh yeah,
I love a fellow child of divorce, I certainly do. So
oh yes,
I feel like already I know a lot about that person.
uh-huh.
And what how old were you when they divorced?
I was 16.
Oh, interesting. Wow, that has its own kind of heartbreak, I would say.
Yeah, I was at like the peak of my
Wow.
like emo phase. It
Damn.
was like a crucial time. One line that I'm gonna have in the revised versions, I'm gonna start the show by saying my 20s were all this is how I am, and my 30s are all why am I like this.
Ooh, yeah. Yes. Um that I feel like I'm currently in that why am I like this right now? So that is so relatable. Like it's why am I like this, and then w- what do I want to be like? What is this best version, and then
Uh-huh.
how do I use these the self-awareness and these patterns that I know my flaws? I could just sit down and spew them all, but then
Yeah.
why am I like this to be able to change where I want to lead to for myself?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's sometimes like really sin and working this stuff out in front of strangers is the way to find the
Oh
answers.
my god, I know. Isn't that it's like it's sick
It,
in a way, but then it's also at the same time like you're inviting someone into this like window of
yeah.
you, and it is also special, and it is like cathartic, especially if you as an audience member could never see yourself doing something like this. Like it does,
Right.
it grants them a window as well. um yeah, it really is a unique experience.
It absolutely is. And that's like that's part of the whole magic of it is just it
Mm-hmm.
occurs in that room in that moment you have that connection through that transparency with who the group of people that are there And for that moment, there's something that I've looked for a lot in my different endeavors, which is community. It's something I always come back to. And I'm glad that are a part of this community. We're able to meet and collaborate. And this won't be the only time we collaborate.
Oh, no. So, it's just the start of many. It's the start for the rest. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Becca. Is there anything else we can plug before we get out here?
No, I just try to limit that plastic use. Am I right?
All right. So folks, get yourself a metal straw. Get yourself a fun tumbler. Make that part of your routine. So, thank you again so much for doing this. This was really fun. I appreciate it.
I love this combo. Thanks for having me, Will.
Another one of those instantly memorable conversations that I could not have planned for in a million years if I had wanted to. I don't know how we're going to solve the garbage patch in the ocean, but I do know that the idea of a flow state and a singularly focused activity is beneficial for me as an individual and likely yours as well. So thank you so much to Becca for this excellent conversation. It was truly a great time, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. Friends, if you enjoyed this podcast and know somebody who you think would be interested in it as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everything related to the show and what I do. We are on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to help out the show, sharing links to episodes and hitting the subscribe button is a great way to do so. You can also follow me on Twitter at ComicWillCarey and at WillCarey23 on Instagram, and at Between Awesome and Disaster, all one word, on Instagram. And if you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can go check out our merch store, which is also available at awesomedisaster.com, as well as our Patreon, where I post a lot of stuff that I do not post anywhere else. And I intend to have more exclusive things to be able to post on the Patreon as well in the very near future. So if you want to check that out, that's another way to help support the show as well. And if you are in a state of flow, may you remain eternally focused. For singular focus, I think, is very beneficial. Modern society pulls us in a lot of different directions, and multitasking and constant availability are now the norm. But sometimes it is very nice to be able to have one thing that you can do and only do that one thing for a little bit of time so that you do not get hit by a bus. That's my philosophy for today. So, folks, thank you again for being here, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.